Dorothy Must Die, Chapter 19. The next day, I woke to see that Glamorous makeover had stuck. Pink cheeks, perfect hair. But the change in my appearance didn't help with my lessons. In the morning, I saw Knox for training, which resulted in more bruises for me to wash off in the spring. With Gert, I still wasn't able to produce any magic. Finally, almost out of sympathy for me, she cast a lighting spell with the snap of her fingers, and we listened to Glamorous singing in her room. Later, I found some small success with Glamora. I poured tea without spilling a drop. After dinner, I found a trunk in my room filled with dresses. A note in Glamora's purple cursive said, "Wear one." Was it a reward? Was it possible that, in all my classes, I was doing best in the etiquette? If Mom could see me now. I stifled through the gowns and pulled out a pretty pale gray one that somehow complemented my hair. It was a strapless silk and floor length. Although I wasn't much of a fan of dresses, this one seemed to know exactly where to hug and exactly where to fall. I didn't know if magic could be woven into fabric or not, but it was perfect. A few seconds later, a bat wearing a purple ribbon flew in, landing on my bed. It wore a note around its neck, written in the same purple cursive. "Follow me." I followed the bat deeper into the labyrinth of the mountains into a cave I hadn't been in before. It was totally Glamora, grand like old movie grand with a capital G. A real crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, and a bank of what I could only guess were windows along one wall and overlooked a stunningly realistic panorama of the Emerald City. But the real spectacle was beneath my feet. The floor was made of glass, and underneath it was rushing water. It must be the water that fed the spring. The effect was like standing on top of a river. It made me dizzy. For a second I almost lost my balance. It's not nearly the same as my ballroom back home, but it will have to do. I spun around at the sound of Glamora's voice to find her in the corner watching me. Just then, Knox appeared in the doorway of the cave. "You didn't wear a suit?" Glamora accused sweetly. Knox made a face and shook his head, as if whatever she'd left for him was too awful for him to even consider. Glamora waved her hands and music filled the air. It was somewhere between jazz and pop, with a soulful, pretty voice that wrapped and unwrapped itself around the beat. It was a love song. If I didn't know better, I would think that Glamora was trying to play at matchmaking. "Very well, but a gentleman never keeps a lady waiting," Glamora insisted. I stifled a laugh, not sure which was funnier, the idea of me being a lady, or him being a gentleman. But the laugh didn't escape, because Knox was striding toward me, rearranging his face and his swagger to make it seem like this was his idea entirely. He gave a little bow. His pointy hair didn't even move when he bent over. I curtsied, determined not to give in too easily to what must be another one of Glamora's etiquette lessons. Knox took my hand and pulled me closer, putting a sure hand on the small of my back, steadying me. We began to dance. I breathed him in against my will. He smelled like the healing spring back in the caves, fresh and alive and full of magic. Glamora called orders at us after every rotation we made around the room. "Posture!" I don't know how they dance where you're from, but here in Oz no one leads. You are equal partners in the dance, in the circle, in the life. I couldn't help but laugh at that one. Are you ever serious?" Knox finally demanded, but even he was starting to break under Glamora's ridiculous instructions. "Are you ever not?" The dance wasn't quite a waltz, something that I'd never done, but had seen in old movies on TV. It was more of an elaborate pentagram that crisscrossed the room over and over. Another couple appeared beside us, a pretty woman with caramel skin and green hair, and a handsome man beside her in a top hat. I opened my mouth to ask who they were. "Illusions," whispered Knox as a munchkin appeared behind him. "Look at your partner," Glamora barked. In seconds, the ballroom had filled with fake couples swirling around us. It made sense that Knox could do this. He was the most coordinated, most physical being I've ever met, but still, with every step we took in unison, I grew more aware of him. Even if he was annoying and arrogant and too serious all the time, I had to admit it. He was hot. I didn't look up. I didn't want him to see anything other than indifference in my eyes. Prom was coming up in a couple of months back at school. There were already posters in the halls with a really cheesy silhouette of a couple lit from behind by the moon. The theme was A Night to Remember. I was never going to go to prom anyway. and it's like everyone would be dancing even remotely like we were now, but I suddenly realized that this might be as close as I would come to a night to remember, dancing with a witch boy who didn't even want me here. As we danced, I dared to steal a glance at his face. In this moment, Knox didn't look like he didn't want me there. Maybe it was years of Glamorous instruction, and he was simply good at being a gentleman. Maybe it was the tapping of our foot to the music against the floor that was almost hypnotic, but he didn't look completely tortured. "Remember," Glamorous said, her voice floating across the dance floor, "this isn't a battle, unless it is, in which case you should keep your eyes on one another, to make sure that no one makes a move that isn't wanted." Glamorous laughed, like it was an inside joke with herself. Knox's face shifted suddenly, like he was remembering something. "You think you're too good for us," Knox said, the brightness of his voice not matching up with his words. "Excuse me?" No one had ever thought I was too good for anything. I grew up in a frickin' trailer. "Gert says you're holding back. You're afraid to be like us." "That's not true. I'm afraid to be like Dorothy, not the rest of you." "You're already like us, you know. You wished for this. You wished to be as far away from your mom as you could get, and you wished came true." "How do you know that? And anyway, that doesn't make me wicked, or formally wicked either," I argued. I tried to drop his hand, but he wouldn't let me go. "You're afraid to do anything but wish for things to happen to you. You wish you could show up on your dad's doorstep, meet his new wife and new kid. You wish you could say all the things you want to say to him. You wish you could have left your mom on your own. You've wanted to run away for almost as long as you can remember, but it took a tornado to do it. You couldn't even make that happen on your own." He gripped my hands tighter and pushed me forward in a dance like I was a puppet. Why was he saying all this? More importantly, how did he know? Gert. Knox wasn't in my head reading my thoughts. Gert was. She'd fed him my secrets my entire life, it seemed. I had never done anything. He was right. I did go through my life just reacting to other people. When I was young, I had escape plans. Big, grand, dumb ones. I was going to start fresh somewhere, where no one knew me, and no one would call me Salvation Amy. But that part didn't sting as much as the dad thing. I did think about going to visit him all the time. I'd had some excuse like I was selling candy for school, and I would see the life he left us for. The pretty wife who was no prettier than Mom before she started with the pills. The little girl or boy, technically my sister or brother, who she was pregnant with when they moved away to Jersey. I was going to show up and meet them and warn that little girl or boy that one day Dad would get tired of him or her too. Glamorous tapped her foot in the glass floor to the beat of the music. "You're losing the beat, Amy." Knox leaned in and dropped his voice to a whisper, words that I hadn't heard since I stepped into Oz. "Am I right, Salvation Amy?" The room spun. I wasn't sure if I was dizzy from him or from my anger. I dropped his hand. He reached for me, but his hand missed me completely and grabbed the air next to me. I was standing in a new spot, across the room from where I started. What the hell? Was it possible? Had I moved myself across the room? "Don't you see? You did it," I heard Gert's voice. She appeared in the center of the room. She'd been there all along. I felt hot. More specifically, my hands felt hot from casting the spell. She had done this on purpose, made Glamorous and Knox bring me to this room and beat at me until I couldn't take it anymore. Like dipping me under the spring, she did what she thought she needed to do. But this time she'd gone too far. The room spun again. My hands got hotter. Light seemed to shoot from them. Not the gentle glow I'd seen from Gert, a searing red glow like darts of fire. The fire darts seemed to be seeking Knox, but Knox lit up with a weird blue light of his own, and the darts seemed to deflect off him. More darts came off my hands, even though I wasn't actually directing them. They shot straight up in the air, and I showered down like firecrackers. I was angry. Too angry. No turning back angry. I wanted to run away from him, from Gert, from all of them, but I couldn't move. Knox made a beeline toward me and grabbed my glowing hands with his own. In a blink, we were standing outside the caves in the same spot he'd taken me the first day of training, the peak of the mountain. This time looking out onto a deep black sky dotted with strange constellations, where the familiar ones should have been. These stars were different from many stars back home. For one thing, they were brighter. For another thing, they were constellations I was used to to never seem to match the images they were supposed to resemble. These formed themselves into clear pictures the longer you gazed at them. There was a horseshoe and a bear and a tiger and a dragon, all as clear as pictures in a book. Gert thought home was stopping you from doing magic. We had to push. We had to know. He pointed into the distance. Look, that one's always been my favorite. As he pointed, a group of bright white pinpricks rearranged themselves into the image of a bicycle. As I looked at it, a memory came back to me. My mother teaching me to ride a bike when I was 5, before we moved to Dusty Acres. It was the first time I've ever tried it without the training wheels, and Mom had promised to hold on so I didn't fall, but at some point as I raced down the hill, the wind in my hair, I'd let out a whoop of triumph. I was doing it. It was only at that moment that I realized Mom had let go. I was on my own. That's when I went crashing into the curb. When I crawled back to my feet, my knee scraped and bloody, my bike in a tangled heap on the ground. I'd look up to hill to see my mom standing at top, clapping for me. I had been pushing back thoughts of Mom on a regular basis now. All Gert's talk of forgiveness had planted a seed that I did not want to let grow. I told myself that all I'd been thinking about was where my fist was going next, about trying to light a candle just by thinking about it and remembering all the stuff in all the books Glamorous had given me. But it wasn't true. She was still there no matter how much I didn't want her to be, and now, standing on top of the mountain with Knox, all I could think about was my mother. I was an idiot. For a few minutes, I had been thinking about prom and dancing with Knox, and how he maybe didn't hate it, and he was just following witchy orders. And somehow that almost made me more angry. It matters how you do this, I said through clenched teeth, staring at him. What you do to get there. You can't just kill someone. The ends do not make it okay. His eyes shifted away from mine and then back again. I saw something pass over his face. Guilt. Regret. No, it was maybe something else. Like curiosity or realization. Like he was happening upon completely new information. Like it never occurred to him that I'd be hurt or mad or anything like that. Like being able to do magic trumped everything. We're the only ones willing to take her down. The only ones capable. It's us or nothing. We're doing one bad thing for the good of Oz. Do you ever not speak the witch party line? Do you ever make a decision that's all on your own? His eyes flicked away from mine. Do you always ask so many questions? Do you ever ask any? You know absolutely everything there is to know about me, and I don't know anything about you. Not really. The cockiness from the dance floor was gone. He slipped out of it so easily it was a surprise. Do you really want to know who I am? He asked. I should have said no and backed away from him, but even though I was mad at him, I was still wanting to crack him open and see what was inside. I nodded. I'm not Knox. What? Knox is just the name Mommy gave me. I don't remember my real name. I remember my parents, their faces, the way they smelled and sounded. I remembered the day that they were taken from me, but my name washed away with them, and there's no one alive who remembers it. Knox. It was in the beginning, when Glinda and Dorothy were just starting to mine everything and everywhere. Glinda hadn't figured it out yet. She wasn't using the Munchkins, she was just using her own magic to mine magic. She blasted a hole in the center of the town and boom, she hit the water table. Everything flooded. We climbed up to the roof. There was this old weather vane up there that was so rusty it didn't even move when the wind blew. I remember my mother told me to hold on to it no matter what, and I did, but my mom didn't, or couldn't. I wanted to let go too, but I held on like she told me to. When the water went down, no one in the village was left, except me. I inhaled sharply. Did Mombi find you then? Later. Much later, I think. I went from town to town. I stole when I had to eat. I slept where I could. Sometimes people were good to me, and sometimes they were horrible. Mombi saved me during one of those horrible times. I stumbled upon the wrong town. The lion was there, but so was Mombi. He glanced up at me, then looked away sharply. He didn't want my pity. What I said back there when we were dancing. I'm sorry I had to do that. I needed to get a reaction from you. You've been fighting all along. You raised yourself. I had an army and 3 witches. Something hit me all at once. What Gert said about magic. How could you use it if you didn't know who you were? I know exactly who I am. But you said I'm a fighter. I'm a member of the Revolutionary Order of the Wicked. It occurred to me. Maybe Mommy hadn't rescued him out of the kindness of her heart. Maybe she had done it to make a perfect soldier. If all Knox had was a faded memory of some woman who may have been his mom, all Knox had ever really had was the Order, and all his magic came from there, from the person they made him. He was as pure as the magic that ran through the spring. He was all magic, hardly a boy at all. He was the knife that he told me he could train me to be. I wasn't sure if I pitied him or envied him. Would I trade away the few good memories of my mom to get rid of all the bad ones? I thought the answer was yes, but who would I be without those memories? Who was Amy Gum without her past? I was running away from home. Knox was marching toward home. Home was a battle for him. And maybe it was for me too. Knox grabbed my hand suddenly. Magic is just energy that wants to be something different, he reminded me. So take what you're feeling right now and turn it into something different. Turn it into magic. I looked at Knox. I wish this moment had been the starting place for today's lesson, not what he did on the dance floor. But I pushed that aside and I tried to do what I'd seen him do. Tried to do what I saw Glamorous and Mommy and Gert do. Be both in my skin and part of the magic around it. I felt the energy coursing through my body like warm water. I thought of my mother. I thought of the question Gert had posed. Who are you? I focused on my sadness, the sadness I'd felt for my whole life, and I willed it to be something different, to change. I thought of my mom again in the kitchen of our trailer, telling me what a disappointment I was. The image blotted itself out, becoming a fiery red light. And then it happened. It was snowing. White, glistening flakes were falling all around me and Knox. He looked at me with an expression that was somewhere between pride and awe. See? He said quietly. I stretched my arms out and spun around laughing. The snow was accumulating. No one does this right away. Not even me, Knox said quietly. You have power. I reached out my hand and let some flakes fall into it. It didn't melt. It wasn't snow, I realized. It was ash. I looked up at Knox in surprise. The fire burned up the sky, he explained. For a second I was disappointed. Snow had been so pure and beautiful, but ash made so much more sense with who I was. You should get back. Gert's going to want to talk to you, he said suddenly. We walked back inside. I didn't take his hand this time. I'd rather fall down in the dark.